St. Paul has a word of advice to Timothy in our first reading today. And it concerns the management of material resources of the church, which remains very relevant until today. Paul is warning Timothy about entrusting church finances to people who have the tendency to run them like business, supposing religion to be a means of gain, if I may quote his words directly. In short, those who have the tendency to manage the church like a profit-oriented enterprise. Alam nyo, the other day, when the IATF came up with new regulations about public religious gatherings, this kind of thinking showed itself very clearly in the vocabulary that they used in referring to the church members who come together for the Eucharistic celebrations. Alam niyo bang tawag nila sa inyo? Customers. Customers. Here is how they put it in their latest advisories posted in the social media. Sabi nila, Alert Level 4. Al fresco dining, 30% capacity. Indoor dine-in, 10% capacity, but for fully vaccinated customers only. Barber shops and beauty salons, the same, 30% outdoor and 10% daw indoor, but again, for fully vaccinated customers only. And then came the part that really surprised me. Religious gatherings, same, 30% outdoor and 10% indoor for fully vaccinated customers only. Hi, I said to myself, ganun pala? Now I see how they regard us. Ang tingin sa atin, business establishments. I do not blame them. Maybe they do not come to church themselves. Or maybe they belong to a church that operates that way. And that is why maybe they regard the church as a business-oriented, profit-oriented establishment. Tiningnan ko sa dictionary ang word customer. Ito yung definition. A customer is one who purchases a commodity or service. Namimili ng kalakal o serbisyo. Talaga ba? Kayong nandito physically, andito ba kayo para bumili ng serbisyo? So they think church services are commodities for sale. I am not in a position to condemn such thinking, even if I take offense at it or even find it insulting. I do not mean to be hypocritical. After all, the church also needs material resources to sustain its operations. But ako na siguro yung pinakaunang magre-resign the moment the church is reduced to a business enterprise. Then, we're not church anymore. In today's gospel, St. Luke tells us that Jesus entrusted the management of the material needs of the disciples to the women volunteers in their company. Not only did these women not demand payment for their services, they actually even contributed generously to the community from their own personal resources. Sa totoo lang, ito yung isang bagay na hinahangaan ko. I'm so full of admiration for many of our church volunteers. How they generously sustain our parish community operations, which obviously require a lot of money. Like, syempre, kailangan ng pang-maintenance, pambayad ng utilities, security, food supplies, office supplies, etc. And how else can we build the needed infrastructure for a parish or diocese if not through voluntary contributions? They're never obligatory. In most parish churches, only the administrative personnel are usually salaried. And in some far-flung parishes in the Philippines, especially in dioceses that are so poor, not even all their administrative staff are salaried. Some of them are part volunteers. But you know, the biggest number of volunteers in the church are the pastoral ministries. Imagine how many volunteers are involved. For example, in our liturgical ministries, may altar servers, may lectors and commentators, may greeters and or ushers, may lay Eucharistic ministers, may mother butler, may choir members, etc., especially on a Sunday. Binabayaran ba namin kayo? Wala akong bayad yan. They're not paid for their services. In the ministries of education and lay formation in the parish, may katekista, youth ministry volunteers, family and life volunteers, biblical apostolate, public affairs ministry, etc. In the ministries of social service and development, merong prison pastoral care, merong ecology ministry, may disaster response and relief operations, merong migrants and itinerants, urban poor ministry, etc. And we also have those in social communications and counseling ministries. Believe it or not, most of these volunteers serve generously, sometimes even from their own resources. Hindi lang time and talent ang ibinabahagi nila. Very often, they even spend for their own transportation and food. Imagine yung kabataan mag-serve sa misa. Nag-jeep pa yan. At ang pinambayad niya, sariling pera pa niya. I call that dedication. And they would even try their very best to come on time, kahit may traffic. Their contributions are simply unquantifiable. They also manage to run programs that are financed by the community, by the members of the parish. Sangkaterbang mga pastoral programs like malnutrition mitigation, healthcare ministries, scholarship programs for poor students, livelihood programs, counseling, etc. If we calculate the amount of funds contributed by the church members for these pastoral programs and projects, they go by the millions. In fact, itong mga tulong, nitong panahon ng pandemya, I'd safely say, by the hundreds of millions already. And they are accounted for carefully by our bookkeepers, audited by our auditors, down to the last centavo. They are received and disbursed with proper liquidation reports and as intended by donors. If the donors say, for the feeding, we don't use that for scholarship. If they say for scholarship, we don't use that for prison pastoral care. We have to respect the will of the donor. Kaya, anong profit-oriented enterprise ang pinag-uusapan nila? Customer daw. I checked out the definition of profit in economics. Ganito ang definition. When expenses are subtracted from income or revenues, the net amount is regarded as profit. That is, if the net amount goes to the pockets of individual stockholders as dividends. Ganyan sa business. That never happens to us. Because we are a non-stock, non-profit institution. And any net income, kung meron, belongs to the community, belongs to the church. And it has to be used only for its mission, not to the individual material benefit of its members or administrators. And yun ang dahilan why we have survived in the last 2,000 years. Ano ba kami, mga bishops and priests and lay staff? We're just stewards. We come and go. Hahakutin ba namin yung simbahang ito? They stay. Everything else stays. None of it belongs to us personally. It belongs to the whole Christian community and the many generations to come. Ano ba kami? Katiwala, caretakers. So what do we regard as the real investments of the church? The real investments, they are the intangibles. We use material resources to invest on spiritual gain. Sabi ni San Pablo. But syempre, we are a human institution. Even St. Paul must have been aware somehow that human as we are, even from among the earliest core of the 12 apostles, merong Judas Iscariote, who was a treasurer, and who had failed in the issue of accountability. Hindi lang pera o hindi lang pag-aari ng kanilang community ang binenta, pati ang Panginoon binenta. And so St. Paul warns us to be watchful of those who are very prone to temptations, as well as the foolish and harmful desires that may plunge the church into ruin and destruction. St. Paul is advocating good stewardship of the church's resources, taking care all the time never to let the love of money or avarice, which he calls the root of all evil, to destroy the church. Instead, he says, we must invest on righteousness, devotion, on faith, love, patience, and gentleness. In a word, we invest on eternal life.